My introduction to the field of evolutionary psychology was through a gentleman by the name of Dr. Desmond Morris. Dr. Morris notes that there are over 250 different species of apes and monkeys, all of which are covered with hair, except one, us. He then proceeds to examine the behaviours of the naked ape through a zoologist's eyes, and as a result we get this wonderfully objective view of the behaviours that have served us well for the 1.5 million years that we have existed as Homo erectus. I have recently finished a book that I believe is the logical extension of this line of thinking. In Hardwired Humans, Andrew O'Keeffe brings evolutionary psychology into the workplace. And using the research that he's done on Professor Nigel Nicholson, Dr. Jane Goodall, and also his years of experience as a consultant and as a senior executive to blue chip organisations, Andrew finds that the naked ape is alive and well in today's offices. And in the process, Andrew is able to give us some excellent solutions as to how to deal with some of the most common ills that organisations face. Change, silo behaviour, how to deal with gossip, and of course, leadership. And I'm fortunate enough to be with Andrew here today and to be able to bring you some insights into what it is we can do in the workplace in order to make a place that we spend a large percentage of our time less like a zoo and more like our preferred habitat. So, Andrew O'Keeffe, welcome.
Thanks, Rod.
Firstly, I just wanted to start by thanking you for the fantastic work that you've done. As you can see, not only have I read your book, but I've also underlined it, I've dog-eared it, I've written comments of thoughts that have occurred to me. It is enlightening and it is practical as well. So further to my introduction, is there anything that you'd like to add in order to summarise the thesis of the book?
Offices that we find ourselves in today are not our natural habitat. What's happened through the long journey of human history, it's only been the last 250 years with the Industrial Revolution, that's obviously in the Western world, many countries even more recently than that, that we moved from being hunter-gatherer and villagers to move into offices, factories and the like. So we're wired for a different habitat, but the behaviour that served us well on the savannah plains over the millennia are alive and well in today's offices, corridors and meeting rooms.
In the book you talk about how you've taken many leaders to the zoo and they've observed the chimpanzees in the enclosure. And you've also mentioned that they've been able to draw lots of parallels between what's happening in the chimp enclosure and what happens back at work. What are some of those parallels?
The key insight is that we're a social animal, and it's really by taking people to the zoo and by this comparison with, particularly chimpanzees, because their social structures are so similar to ours, and so leaders very quickly see that their community, like our social structures, are based on family groups. They live within clans of a certain size, or what's known as communities, which links to their brain size as our clan size links to our brain size. Social animals, one of the characteristics of social animals is hierarchy and pecking orders. There's therefore a lot of politics that goes on. One of the key insights into the social dynamics of chimp communities is grooming, which we do in the form of gossip. So most of these 9 instincts that we brought out of the savannah are still existing in these forest social animals, chimpanzees particularly.
You also make some excellent observations about the nature of leadership, of course, how the alpha male rises to the top, how they get to stay there. What are some of the observations that the leaders take away from there?
One of the key insights from particularly Dr. Jane Goodall's work over her 50 years at Gombe in Tanzania is insight into, first of all, how leaders or individual males get to the top job. If we're talking about bonobos, we will talk about alpha females. In a chimp case, it's always alpha males. And it seems to be a personality trait. There's some individuals who have little interest in progressing through the pecking order. They're not prepared to take on the fights and the battles and the politics. But for those who do, they get there through a variety of strategies, including coalitions and politics and sheer contest and display, intimidating others. What's really interesting, the second point would be from her observations, is that the good leaders, we can talk about what they are, the good leaders, they last as leaders for about 10 years. The bullies and the tyrants, they only last as a chimp leader for about 2 years.
You mentioned in your answer that one of the ways to rise to the top is through contest, display, intimidation. So that gets you to the top position, but does that keep you there? What happens? How do you stay at the top?
Part of what then really influences leadership style is the culture of an organisation, which is set, again, through hierarchy and status, through the behaviours of the one or two most powerful people. So that governs then what's expected of the leaders in an organisation, and what are the shared leadership behaviours or expectations, and is it a sort of organisation which expects and clearly communicates constructive leadership styles, or do the bullies and the tyrants get on okay around here? And that's decided by the views and the values of the most powerful people.
I can imagine that there would be some chief executives out there who would say, hang about, Andrew, this tends to dehumanise humans a bit. You know, I'm a bit more evolved than the average monkey in an enclosure. How do you deal with that issue?
It's actually not a question or an issue that comes up. And I wonder if that's because of the way it unfolds when we talk about it and when we take leaders through it, it just seems to make sense. That the behaviour and these 9 instincts explain much of the behaviour that people now recognise. Up until now they didn't have a framework to explain them, and people very quickly move through accepting the explanation of the 9 instincts, and then it's about applying that knowledge.
Now, in the book you talk about how there's a vast body of research that identifies that there are some important numbers to us as humans. There's the number 4, the number 7, and the number 150. How does that work? Tell me about that.
So the 4 comes from our form of grooming being gossip. People will instantly recognise that if they're at a conference, the conference breaks for morning tea, and people are standing around talking, having a cup of tea. And people, when we ask the question, what size groups are people in, people immediately recall, yeah, we're actually in groups of between 2 and 4. And where that comes from is our gossip ratio, courtesy of Professor Dunbar at Oxford, one of his points is that we use our form of language as gossip and grooming. So whereas the chimps can only groom physically, we do it by vocal capability and gossip, sharing social chit-chat. And we have a ratio of 1 speaker to 3 listeners. And so what happens when we're standing around conversing, we will stand in groups of up to 4, but also if a 5th person joins, that breaks the ratio, and one of the 5 will not be connected and break off, or the group of 5 will within 30 seconds break off into groups of 2 and 3. So that's number 4. Number 7 is our family size unit. So our, again through the long journey of human history, the building block of human societies is family units, and that number is basically about 5 to 9 people. So we have a need to belong intimately, and we carry that forward to work, which is teams being around about that size. And the most important group that I need to feel a sense of identity with at work is my team. And then where the 150 comes from, again from Professor Dunbar, is it relates to our brain size being the clan that we can connect with. If people wrote down the list of acquaintances they have in their life, they're going to come to about 100 to 150 people. And that's our traditional nomadic clan size. The equivalent to chimps, they're not quite as brainy as us. They can't connect with the politics and the dynamics of 150. Their community size in the wild is roughly about 50.
And you said there was some sort of link here with Facebook as well.
Yeah, so when Facebook runs the numbers, which they did for The Economist, of looking at intimate connections, not so much the bragging rights of how many friends you have under contest and display, when they looked at intimate connections of people posting information to each other's profile, then they found support for this small number of intimates in their analysis being about 5 to 6 people.
So I can have my 7 intimate friends on Facebook, I can have the 150 that I communicate with fairly regularly, and so the 500 plus friends is really just status and display. Fantastic.